My name's Stuart Holm. I work for the Woodland Trust. I've worked for the Woodland Trust for about 7 years now. Previous to that I worked for FWAG, Leicestershire and Rutland FWAG, as a farm conservation advisor. When I moved to the Woodland Trust, it was quite an insular organisation. We did an awful lot of having our own sites and our own woodlands, looking after those, letting the public on them and to have a look around, but we didn't really do a lot off site. So we started up our own grant schemes. We started to look at how we could progress those grant schemes within the landowning community. And as a direct result of that, of course, we work with farmers and landowners. Now the big sticking point, as we had with farmers and landowners, really was that the loss of basic farm payment, single farm payment as was back then, caused a lot of farmers to not want to necessarily plant woodland around their farm. And we couldn't really do a lot about that until quite recently. But basic farm payment legislation a few years ago stipulated that anything over 100 trees per hectare was woodland, anything under 100 trees per hectare was wood pasture or grassland. And so that sort of left us as was. And 2 years ago the legislation changed a little bit and stated that as long as agricultural activity was taking place beneath the canopy, then planting could take place, and that opened the doorway for projects like this. So I came down to the Allerton Trust a few years ago and started talking and looking at how we could progress a grant scheme, or a project along these lines. And we looked at building in a whole variety of things, from how it was going to be good for game management, to how it was going to be good from a grazing perspective, to how it would work with long-term timber and short-term timber for wood chip for the boiler up in the centre. And so what we've done is we've got just a shade under 5 hectare grass paddock here. We've planted that with 14 different sections in 7 different densities that run from 100 up to 1600 trees per hectare. We're looking at the densities fitting in with the Forestry Commission on the top end, so we've got 1600 trees and 1100 trees per hectare as the higher end, and that's very much along the lines of the Forestry Commission standard for woodland creation. We've then got 100, 200 and 400 trees per hectare, which we'd like to think will fit in much better with the grazing regime and with where we're going from a grazing project perspective. And then we've got 600 and 800 trees per hectare, which may well fit in a little bit better with the coppicing side of things for the short rotation coppice or medium rotation coppice for the wood chip boilers. The great thing about working at Allerton Trust is, of course, that we can tie that in with a huge amount of research. And so on the 100, 200 and 400 trees per hectare, we're looking very much at getting research on all of those plots done. Our research is going to take the form of looking at the soil management, the soil structure, the soil biodiversity and the earthworm population. We're then going to take that back and start looking at the tree growth and the interaction between the sheep and the livestock within the field, and how that works with different densities and different stocking densities throughout the site, with regard to how the trees grow and the growth rates and the canopy closure. We also want to look very much at the vegetation on the ground and how different canopies will affect the different species and the different grass on the ground, but also with a view to the growth rate of that grass as well. So whether we'll get higher growth rate on certain areas, how much it will drop off when we get canopy closure, and also the productivity of that grass, so we can feed that back to look at live weight gain. So we should hopefully in the future be able to look at the viability of grazing throughout 100, 200 and 400 trees per hectare, and be able to give an idea of how much loss of production has gone out of those areas as a direct result towards the livestock, a live weight gain. But I'm sure any of you who manage livestock will know that it's more than that. You start looking at the livestock in specific with the sheep in here, that you get an awful lot of gain from having shelter and shade. And so when you've got a very, very hot day, we've got the Woodland Trust got a sheep up in Bangor University, which is has a temperature probe up its backside, and you can stick that into the middle of the field to see how much of a difference that has. It's not a live sheep. Bangor's a good place to keep that, I think, Bangor University. But so What it does is it shows that when it's a particularly hot day, that sheep can get up to 60 degrees Celsius in direct sunlight, and of course you're not going to get any live weight gain, and that from a health and well-being point of view of the sheep, that's pretty bad. You know, it really is get the mint sauce out at that stage, isn't it? So you need to be starting to put that into perspective, looking at what shade and shelter you can get into the field to help with the livestock, with the health and well-being of that livestock. So in my view, what we're looking at here is not necessarily this is a total woodland and this is being, you know, the be all and end all and what we'd be selling to farmers. It's a combination of about 6 or 7 different woodlands. One being the fact that as a farmer you might take away from this that this is a nice grass field, and actually I could put half a hectare of the bottom of this field into 400 trees per hectare, get the benefits of the shade and shelter out of this, and because it's planted outside of a grant scheme and it's planted perhaps with your own money or perhaps with money through a Woodland Trust grant scheme, that you can graze beneath that, and as long as you've got agricultural activity taking place, and well, let's face it, sheep grazing would be fairly agricultural activity, you would hope, that you should be able to retain that as grassland and therefore keep your basic farm payment in that area whilst getting all the benefits of the sheep and of the shade and shelter of the trees, and not necessarily losing a huge amount of viability. You then start looking at various other aspects of the site and what else you want to get on the back of that. So whether it's wood chip or whether it's timber production, etc., and start to factor that in, or whether it's game management and start to pull those in as and around it. Species that we planted here, pretty much all native. We've planted with the majority of native trees, roughly speaking 25% high canopy, 50% mid canopy and 25% shrub. We have, because at the Woodland Trust we perceive everything as everything up to 2,000 years old as being native. Anything younger than that, and we're not that keen on it. It's you know, it could be a bit dodgy. So we have taken the view on here to allow walnut in, and to allow European privet, which we wouldn't necessarily do in our own grant schemes, because we want the European privet from a cover point of view. And you'll see a few blocks around here that are fenced out specifically for shrubs. That's to give a good base to the woodland from a wildlife and a game perspective, and make sure that we've got some ground cover in there. So we know that they're going to be semi-sacrificial areas with regard to basic farm payment going forwards, but we're prepared to do that because we want this woodland to be several different aspects and have that game and wildlife management side of things to it. We've planted everything with 1.2 metre tubes and 2 50mm stakes next to it, with a view that that is going to hold up against the sheep grazing. Only time will tell, but it is a trial, so if it all goes belly up, we got it wrong. We think that's probably got a good chance of working. And we've made a very conscious decision to not spray around the base of the trees, because this is a grazing project and not a woodland creation project. So what you'll find is that in doing that, we don't allow the tree to get as much moisture and nutrients as it perhaps would do if you'd sprayed with a glyphosate around the base of the tree. But in spraying with the glyphosate around the base of the tree, you open up bare ground, and what you do then is you open it up to weeds, to docks, to thistles, etc. And we wanted this to retain as a very nice grass sward. So it's a tricky one, but that's the way that we've gone through it. We've had several groups say, why didn't you do 50% sprayed and 50% not? Why have you done these shelters? Why have you used these stakes? The view is that this is a bit of a jack of all trades woodland anyway, and starting to trial different tubes and different things starts to take away some of the value of some of the research, but also becomes too mind-blowing to start wondering what on earth you're doing in different trials all over the place. So we've already covered a multitude of sins here. We've also done, about a month ago, we did a drone flyover. We flew just above the middle of the site and did a 360-degree overview, and we flew about a 4-minute tract around the outside on a GPS track, so that we can come back and refly that every 2 or 3 years, look at the growth rate of the trees, but also start to look at which trees are doing well, because what we can do is use some certain software to look at the chlorophyll that's coming out of the different leaves and utilise that to know which trees are growing well, which trees are growing where, and pull that data back in, which may well be something we can use going forwards in relation to the rest of the research. I know I've gone over my 5 minutes because I always do. So please shout up with some questions, and if you're interested in any sort of agroforestry scheme going forward, you want to talk to me about it, or you want to look at potential funding through the Woodland Trust and our grant schemes, then grab a card off me, and we can perhaps have a chat at a later date.